Hi, everyone. I'm Maren McKellin, Manager of Field and Experiential Learning and Study Abroad. And we in the Global Ed Office thought it would be interesting to talk to our faculty to get their perspectives on the pandemic and how it relates to their fields of expertise. Joining me today is Adam Fotos, Assistant Professor of Humanities and creator of several comics, including the series Dragon and Goat and the graphic novel Panopticorn. We also have Dr. Julia diLiberti, a Professor of Humanities who has worked on Belgian, French, and Francophone African comics. She was an NEH Fellow at the Rutherford B. Hayes Presidential Library, working on cartoons of the Gilded Age.
Oh, let me show my shirt. The Gilded Age Illustrated. There we go. Thank you.
Excellent prop. She has given several presentations on the African comic book and published related articles. Thank you so much to both of you for joining me here today. Julie and Adam, since you're here today to talk about the pandemic in relation to comics and cartoons, there is a difference, I learned. And just for the sake of our discussion, I want to clarify that a common distinction, as I understand it, is that a cartoon is a single panel image used to convey an idea, and a comic is a story told using a sequence of panel images. Is that right?
I think we start out, I think that's a good, well, I think Adam would, yeah, I think we know that there are lots of books written all about this. I think one of the things that I might add, or that as I often see added, is that generally comics have, at least for even if it's just a book, the characters recur. So it's not a series of single, and then I don't know, Adam, you probably have a much longer distinction to make.
Yeah, well, I think just because they're, just to kind of fold into the medium a lot of different things that people are doing. So like with abstract comics, you may see a comic that doesn't even like characters. So like the recurring characters, I think, is a good, like it's one of those points where there's just a lot of discussion. So, but I think the idea of single image versus multiple image or sequential image, like that's a good place to sort of start off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sequential, right? I like that. Okay, sequential.
So Julia, do you want to start us off today? I know you have some interesting things to share with us.
Yeah, I have some political cartoons, and I think one of the things that I think about cartoons is that Adam will probably talk about this too, but they are a compact message, and they distill lots of big ideas in a small space, and you got to be witty and smart and have an opinion, even if the opinion you put out there sort of makes people argue on either side of it. But you have to be willing to offend and not offend. But I have some political cartoons. I thought it'd be interesting to look at how people around the world are processing COVID. And so I just want to share, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing a couple of those. I have this PowerPoint. And so I just want to share a couple of the cartoons that I think are interesting to look at, and from around the world. So some of them are not as political as they are interesting, and most are political. I love this. This is from a Palestinian-Syrian cartoonist, Hannah Abbas. And a lot of these cartoons I took from an organization called Cartooning for Peace, which was set up by Kofi Annan, I believe in 2006, because he also feels that cartooning and arts are a way to get people to action, and also a way to get commentaries from around the world on what's happening around the world. So I would recommend that website, Cartooning for Peace. And this comes from, well, they gather cartoons from other places and put them in one place. But I love this, and if we were in a classroom, I would make you go into small groups and talk about what this is saying. I'm just going to tell you, right? What I think is interesting about this is we know so little about the coronavirus, and we know so little about what's happening, and it's a puzzle, and new symptoms keep emerging. And then we keep trying different medicines, and we have no idea how we're going to treat this disease because we don't know how it works. And so I just love this whole maze thing. It's not terribly, go ahead, Adam.
No, I love this one too, because I just want to like get in there with a pencil and try to figure out.
Do the maze.
Do the maze. Good, and then you would solve the crisis, Adam. That's your homework. This one I think is one of the most devastating comics for us in terms of the pandemic, and this is overlapping many crises. What I found in looking for political cartoons is that COVID is exacerbating issues that already exist. And so we have, I just want to give some history. Ahmaud Arbery was hunted for sport, and he was murdered on February 23rd. But the tapes weren't turned over to the police until May 7th, when another man who'd been involved in that turned over the tape, or the tape was found. Not clear how he wasn't but he's now arrested as well. But you have an African-American man here saying, okay, hon, I'm going out for a run. And she says, don't forget your mask. And you're expecting her to see a COVID mask, but we have the mask for a white person so that he can go out and be safe while he's running. And again, I think this speaks to the overlay of issues that are exacerbated by, well, this is, killing Black people has been an issue for 400 years, but again, this overlay of issues. And Adam, at any time, if you want to jump in and add comments, you know, I hope you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then we move to China, and I find this interesting. Again, China is a lot of countries right now are sort of going through this anti-democratic, don't speak out phase. And this is a Swiss cartoonist talking about China. And you know, in China this year, June 4th, in 1989 was Tiananmen Square, the democratic protest that was brutally crushed. And we've got the dog peeing here, and we've got the leader of China saying we are ordering a perpetual confinement in Hong Kong. So the democratic sign is sort of being tilted down. We've got the police in the background, and we've got the umbrella that is no longer yellow. The yellow umbrella was a symbol of unity, and it was a symbol of resistance, of passive resistance, when people were, when the Chinese were throwing pepper spray on people. So many cartoonists feel that their leaders are using COVID as excuses to take away civil liberties. And then
Julia,
we've got,
can you go back?
I'm sorry, Mark.
So what's the significance of the blue umbrella? I know you said what the yellow umbrella was. Was it just a departure of the yellow umbrella then?
I think it's because, for me, and it might just be the inking, Adam, you might be, but for me, this is that the yellow umbrella was sort of this bright color passive resistance, but now it's been put down because even that's not going to be effective, right? So if we look at this next one, you'll see, this is, I have to look, this is Badu Chow, and he is living in exile in Australia. For a while, he had the Chinese government was looking, he was working from exile. He is naturalized in Australia, but he is a dissident, and so this is his cartoon, and I think it's interesting. This is what's a Swiss portrayal of it, and this is his portrayal. He's working with a Danish artist to release some art, but this was before June 4th. I think this was released around May 17th, but this is the new Corona, and here, again, you've got the yellow umbrella. And of course, in Tiananmen Square, there was what they call Tank Man, and he says Tank Man is what motivated him, but the man lying down in front of the tanks in Tiananmen Square. And you notice that the tanks, of course, have the coronavirus. And so again, this overlay of issues of corona and what happens to be going on. I mean, I think comics are an excellent way to look culturally and through the era about what any culture's preoccupations are at the moment. And I think this seems, I have people in my head saying too many words, too many words. But this, this again came from, this is a Bangladeshi cartoonist, and he has been arrested. And I'm going to just flip ahead here to, there's an alert on Cartooning for Peace. There's Reporters Without Borders, and the Cartoonists for Peace are trying to do an action to get Ahmed and another cartoonist taken out of Bangladeshi prison. And so on the left, this cartoon here, it says, Corona means don't in Bangladeshi. So it means don't do this. We will beat you with brooms and you will disappear, and we will sue you under the Digital Security Act as a bonus. So the Digital Security Act was passed in 2018, and allegedly it was passed to protect information, but it's now being used to persecute and arrest cartoonists and people who are now dissidents who because criticism is not allowed of the government. Again, here's Cartooning for Peace. So I think when you look at political cartoons, it's not just the image, right? We all know it's just unpacking a whole set of cultural and political issues going on. I've been fascinated, I've done some work on African comic books, and I was fascinated. People keep saying, oh, poor Africa, this is going to kill everybody in Africa. And in the beginning, I like these two cartoons. This was this was January 31st, as Corona was just coming into play, and Gatto's from Kenya. And the United States is looking warily at Africa, and Brazil is looking terrified at Africa, and Europe is looking really mad at Africa. Because, in this perception, Africa is going to be the one that's going to make us, that's going to lose a number of people. And then we have this from, this is from March, so 2 months later, 3 months later, 2 months later. where Cato FM says poverty in Africa, people are trying to come over and make better lives, and Europe is saying stay on your continent. And today, travel bans, I don't know, Karen Myers, Ferrara Myers, did this on education. She's from Eswatini, and she said Africa, or her country and many countries in Africa, put down very extensive and aggressive travel bans. So she's not traveling anywhere, and there's a very limited number of planes coming in. And when you do come into the airport, you're going to spend 14 days in quarantine that you have to pay for, unless you've got somebody who can take you in and guarantee that you're going to be quarantined. So I think it's right. Today we have Africa saying to the Europeans, stay on your continent, don't come this way. And this article, I mean, a lot of things where people are like, well, Africa, you know, people keep wondering why Africa's numbers aren't as bad as Europe. Brazil is the new hot point. We were the hot point in Italy, and people keep saying, well, why isn't Africa? You know, so obviously Africa's not testing. Or, you know, Africa has a different climate. It's really hot, although that hot has a lot of humid variations. And then there's these other, you know, maybe they're Afro-immunology because, you know, they're so used to malaria, they're not getting corona. And what this article said is, the truth is, we're not willing to accept that African governments were far better at responding. They had a whole Ebola crisis, so they have protocols in place. And so I think it's interesting that we're willing to look at any reason that Africa's not suffering as much as other countries, continents, because we can't accept that they might be doing something better. Yeah. I think that goes back to racism. You guys are nice to let me keep going on. I think I will show one more. Because I think and then I have more, of course, but I don't want to take all our time. But in Brazil, these are two, this is, you know, that we forgot. I mean, didn't we already forget about the Amazonian forest fires that destroyed 9,700 square miles of Amazonian forest? And this cartoon is from a Swiss cartoonist, and it says, Brazil, after the fires, we have the coronavirus, and then we have this indigenous person saying, well, they're killing all the trees that rest because they're going to make coffins out of them. And then there's a cartoon, I mean, a report called the Brazilian Report, and I wasn't quite able to, I'm not sure, well, anyway, of the cartoonist, but we have all the other crises in Brazil saying, hey, back of the line, coronas, because you've got the forest fires, you've got police brutality where they're killing more than criminals, we have violence against women. And of course, the president, who's not pictured here, but that seems to be one of the things that comes up commonly in the cartoons, is the president of Brazil being in the way of many things. They have had oil spills. You can see the oil spills on the tortoise here, forest fires. And again, so I'll leave those others, and if we have time, we can come back to some of those. But again, I just like cartoons because they distill so much information about what's lying underneath the surface of that drawing. But I think those are cartoons, and I think, Maren, that's why the cartoons make a difference, is they give us a pulse of what's happening in the world in some very distilled and shorthand ways that the more you want to research, the more we can unpack what's happening. But I think Adam's going to talk less about single frame cartoons and more about the medium itself. If I'm correct there?
Yeah, Adam, can you elaborate a little? I mean, Julia, that was interesting, and just the power of a single panel, like you said, and just the simplicity of how it looks simple when you look at it, but unpacking it. Adam, how has COVID-19 affected the medium from your perspective?
Well, from what I've seen, most of the sort of chatter about the COVID-19 and comics has been around mainstream comics and the impact on the sort of brick and mortar comic book stores and what that's going to mean for comic books, like sort of stores in the future. The past like 10, 20 years, comics as a medium has been moving even in and out of the mainstream, has been moving like more and more digital. And so it's looking like a lot of the major players, the publishers like Marvel and DC, are starting to issue a lot of their single issue comic books that are usually physical. They're talking about releasing them digitally, which is, kind of a big deal after the main distributor, I forget exactly when they did it, but Diamond is the main distributor for physical comic books, and they stopped distributing a couple months ago. And so, so that's I think going to have a big sort of impact on it. But for me, like I'm a little bit less interested in mainstream comics and more in like what people are doing with the medium, either on their own or in the sort of independent and sort of alternative comics scene. So I'm looking at like Instagram and Twitter to some extent to find comics these days, and there's a lot that's out there. One of the comic book stores that I really like is Desert Island Comics, and hold on, let me see while I'm talking if I can pull it up on Instagram here. But Desert Island Comics is really great in terms of sort of thinking about the art side of comics, and they really promote independent creators. And so with a lot of what they sort of share, so this is their just Instagram page. And they've got like a lot of great stuff. Not all of it is safe for work, so I'll just sort of leave it here. But it's, a lot of people who are doing comics not to, hit big markets, but to, tell their own unique, quirky stories with their own styles. What the hashtag, the Desert Island, or I guess the sort of page that they've started up is Rescue Party, which is pretty cool in terms of linking you to some independent comics artists who are dealing with, as it says, a series of comics dreaming about a utopian or ideal future post-virus. And so we've got a lot of sort of different comics here. And this can link you to some of the people who are really, thinking about, what is the future? So the medium of comics, I think, is particularly well geared for being contemplative in terms of story, but also shifting through time and space. And so we see that a lot. Where you have this sort of stereotype of what comics are, which is often like science fiction, but we can also think of like the sort of more maybe nuanced like speculative fiction, which doesn't necessarily have to be over the top robots shooting out lasers from their eyes. It can be a lot of different sort of narratives, but really interesting styles that they're pursuing here.
So Adam, you're saying that more people are producing comics at this time?
So like I was actually like I hypothesized that, and I'm wondering if it's like maybe true, because the more I sort of dig into it, so for the hashtag like quarantine comics on Instagram, there are like 3,000 posts, which I guess is within the last 3 months that people have been doing like specifically comics about quarantine. If those people are just like linking up to that idea of making a comic about their experience. But I think it's an interesting thing, because for how do we deal with this time that we're sort of like indoors, we're maybe taken out of our usual routine, and I think it is a good time to get creative, and I think a lot of people have been taking advantage of that. The flip side is what I've been kind of reading. Some other people have said that there's maybe too much pressure on creative artists, that you've got this time in quarantine, and you should be making like your masterwork using all this sort of supposed like extra time, when really that time's just gobbled up by being anxious.
Well, and people have children and jobs from home still, and other responsibilities.
Yeah.
Can you talk about it in terms of a vehicle to communicate in other ways?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Adam teaches, and Adam actually has his students take visual notes, because you believe in the power of the image that much, right? To affect and to help people distill thoughts. And
yeah, I mean, I think it's like a great communication tool. And so for me, I think what's like maybe more useful, and that maybe we'll see more of, are people doing like small comics, just like sort of, little comics about their daily lives. Even though we're, often in these weird routines where we're doing the same thing every day, time has no meaning, and, the weekend is not distinguished from like the weekday. Like the sort of comic as a medium can be a really fun way to like keep a diary where you're writing down your thoughts or your, what's happening, but you're also tracking images as well, like things you see. And it doesn't matter like if you're horrible at drawing, right? Like you can make any sort of drawings and kind of get away with it. I think that's what I also like about alternative and indie comics, is that there's a wider spectrum of image making. And so I think people feel a lot more comfortable when they see that, in terms of like, how can I make a comic? Well, you can make a stick figure, you can make a comic. Like that's all it really takes. Or even just a smiley face floating around a page. You've done it. Now, so I'm interested in like a lot of the autobiographical things that have come out of, definitely out of that are going to come out of and have come out of the pandemic. But there's also a lot of sort of informational things that have come out as well. And so on graphic medicine, so I'm going to share back here if I can find it. Graphic medicine, and maybe Julia, you can talk more about the graphic medicine, like what they do.
Well, I'll just start because I think you're probably more into it at this point. But they bring together people in medical fields who draw comics. And I remember saying to one of the doctors there, why is it so many doctors draw comics? And he said, isn't that sort of like asking why so many doctors play piano? I don't really think it is, because parents say you have to take piano and we're going to sign you up for lessons. Nobody says you have to draw and we're going to sign you up for lessons. At least not, So anyway, but well, I'm going to let Adam talk and I'll just jump in as needed. But there's all kinds of medical professions that need communicators, and so Adam, I think that's where you're going to pick it up, right?
Yeah, and so like I just wanted to point out, like, so if you just search for COVID-19 Comics, Alice Jaggers has compiled back in, let's see, so this I think started on March and has been updated continuously. So she's taking a lot of different categories for comics, educational comics that are sort of teaching people about like what's real, what should we trust, what should we be doing? Because I think that's a big thing in this crisis we've been getting a lot of mixed messages. And if you're hearing, all this garbage from one like orange-haired monster, and you hear, something from a scientist that's like the complete opposite, you don't really know what to do, how to deal with it. And so like at least the comics medium can kind of walk you through these ideas with like pictures. And so this has got a lot of
can you go back just for a second? I think you sort of already talked about this, but I mean, I love this. We've got ethics, education, and then comics by care providers and comics by patients. So we're getting both sides of that equation.
Yeah,
yes.
I think that like that's like the informational side, but also the sort of experiential side is really important, because comics, what's different than like video is a little bit harder in terms of production, especially if you're like wanting to make a cartoon. But even just like holding up a video camera and making it succinct in a way that people will listen, I think it's a lot harder to maybe do that. So the comics medium allows you to be visual and also communicate your experience. So I'll just kind of scroll through here of a few of the different ones that they have on the main, but like hand washing, like why do you need to do it? But you can kind of click through each of these and see the sort of linked up comics here. I like the sort of this one in terms of like the style and just the quickness of it, because I feel like for me it's a really useful tool to think through things. Like even if it's not a comic that I want to post or to put out publicly, it can be a nice way to just sort of like track what you're finding out.
Have you always drawn, Adam? Oh, I'm sorry, Maureen.
No, I was just gonna say, from a layperson's perspective, there's a whole engagement piece of this. Like you could throw a short paragraph up there, or you could put that up there, and you're gonna get people in just by the way that it looks. So absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like sort of seduction, I think, that happens with the image, and even like this one, right, with the curve. Everybody's talking about flattening the curve, but I mean, no one was really being consistent in messaging like what is the curve, like what does it mean? Like just throw an image of a hospital there. I was really interested with this, and this is a website that I'll probably be using for an entire section of my classes in the fall, where we'll be exploring these comics and like different ways that you can use the medium to kind of communicate information, for sure.
Adam, I know when we were speaking earlier, you talked about your project with Baylor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with like graphic medicine and I've been kind of interested in how science is intersecting with like the medium of comics. And for my own practice, I was hired, I think it was 3 years ago now, to work with Baylor University and the Aiden Lab for genomic architecture. And it's a partnership with Baylor and Rice University. And they hired me to actually create a comic to sort of go along with a lot of the genomic information and data that they were aggregating on their website, rather than writing papers on the information that they were pulling from the genome of the cheetah or the genome of the giraffe. They wanted to, in their share out of that data set, because they're making the data completely available to the public. They want to make sure that people in the public can actually access it in a way that's, maybe a little bit more meaningful, or at least, different if you don't have that scientific background. Mm-hmm. So they commissioned me to create the chromosomes, and so the chromosomes is now part of the DNA Zoo website, and I'll pull that up here.
So science and art coming together, Adam, and obviously you have a bit of a scientific brain if you can distill that, right? I mean, how are you taking this information and...
So here, this is a DNA Zoo, and yeah, I mean, I don't pretend to understand everything for sure. It's like pretty tough stuff, but it's been really interesting to actually learn a lot more about like how genomes work, and then also just working with the scientists who are in this comic. They're largely doing the writing of like this, what they want the story to do, and what sort of how they want to explore the idea of how genes make us up. This is the first one, which is the cheetah comic, and this was where I had this idea that the genome, you're sort of disassembling it, trying to find out all the pieces and parts of the genes and the chromosomes, and so it's kind of like an IKEA kit. Yeah. So you have trying to put them back together. But yeah, so it's been a lot of fun sort of figuring out how to work through a lot of these ideas, and also the genetic traits of the animals, which is pretty fun too.
So when they read your comic, do the scientists, they read it and say visually, are they looking at all your visual cues too? Do you guys come up with those together? Is that all you?
Yeah, well, so they kind of give me the story ideas, and then I come up with all the visuals, and then they give me feedback. So if I draw the giraffe wrong, like in this one, I think I had one of the legs backwards on accident. And so they were like, oh, that leg needs to be flipped around. And then also the tail, I had the tail curled up. And no one could get confirmation if the giraffe could actually like raise its tail more vertically. So we were like, okay, let's just put it down, and that's fine.
Because it goes that way. That's funny.
Right. But yeah, so like there's a lot of editing that happens there, but it is a lot of fun, sort of working with them in that capacity. And they've been really busy, so we haven't been able to do quite a lot more with that other than the 4 that we started with. But I've been working with them more recently on some other projects, and one project that's like sort of COVID-19 related that I think they'll be releasing in the next month or two.
So obviously they see a need to communicate it in this way also. And Julia, do you have anything to add on another level about why are comics, what is the draw of communicating things like viruses and science and, in comic or cartoon form?
I think, I'm just sort of thinking about like, but if you think about church windows in the medieval era, they knew people were not literate, right? The way you get people in is to tell the stories through pictures, right? And I mean, comics have that overlay of you can probably understand some stuff with the pictures. Comics are different. They expect you to be able to read and to write. And yet, if you're only going to do one or the other, you can still get, I don't know, Adam, would you say 75% of the story? I mean, I think the visual,
totally.
maybe more, right? But I mean, I think the visuals just add so much depth. Like a yellow umbrella is going to change the story of a tank coming at you, so. What I really like about Adam's stuff, though, he's got this panopticon. I'm not doing an ad for you, Adam, but this is another place where he brought science and art together. And what I like about comics is really there are no boundaries in terms of what can be communicated through the medium. And I just love that Adam brings together all these pieces and these, this is like literary theory too, right? I mean, you use Todorov, right? So I mean, I just we're looking at a guy who can bring together a whole bunch of different mediums and then tell us about them. So, Adam, what are your thoughts on why comics are such an effective medium?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does have a lot to do with just the storytelling through pictures. We're visual creatures, so like our brains are really heavily loaded on the visual side when we have access to that sense. And so I think that, we're drawn to looking at pictures, but also like they're just fun. And so something like COVID-19, which is, pretty terrifying as a concept and like what it's going to do to our society. But if you put in a cute little character or something, it makes it a little bit more palatable to think about how we're going to survive. I mean, for me, it's been like a survival mechanism too. So I've got my Dragon and Goat comic that I've been doing. And we were stuck home with our daughter she's 4, and we've been stuck home with her since her birthday in March. And I mean, stuck. It's been fun, but also it's been challenging because we've been trying to work and also give her like a stable school or not school, but like play environment thing. But very quickly, I decided I wanted to do other drawings than just Paw Patrol and the superhero girls, and do my own comic characters with her. So I came up with the Dragon and Goat coloring book. It's also science related because Goat is a scientist. In one of the books, he works for Argonne National Lab as a research assistant. But in this comic, what I did was made it more of like a coloring book so that it's interactive and it's available for free so that like everybody can just download the pages and then kids can use their imagination to kind of engage with the sort of Dragon and Goat comic. So in this one, like we've got Dragon up here and then going downstairs to Goat's lab, and then some sort of experiment has gone wrong, but you've got to actually like draw in like what's happening for it to sort of make sense. So there's like a loose story that I use in the Quarantinuum coloring book, but it's something that you can just like kind of have fun with and play with.
Even your names of it, that's coloring book with a Q. So everything you do has a layer of creativity and Sorry, Julia.
My accident in the lab would be hydrochloroquine poured into the vat of chocolate, and how am I going to save the chocolate, right?
Comes back to chocolate.
But I also want to say too, Maren, in these days, DAYS and DAZE of coronavirus, people are having problems. Documented, it's concentrating, and I think a quick visual is helpful when we can't really focus on longer passages and paragraphs. And
I agree with you. Even from my job, we're thinking about protocols for the future for travel for our students, and the things that we're looking at are graphic and small and just something that is just reminders to do this and this and this. And it's opened my eyes to everything a lot of what I look at now in terms of what do we want to do and how can we convey that information and do it in a way that you don't want to trip people up right now, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so we are coming toward the end. I want to ask you, is there anything that you two, that I didn't ask or that you two want to talk about before we sign off?
Tons more, but not here. I mean, just like no
Any
time, right?
any cartoon, Julia, that you want to leave us with that you didn't get to share?
Oh, no, no, I guess because I'm like all nervous about like the time it would take to call that up and everything. No, I wish I should have, I could have saved one to the end. No, no, not right now. But no, I do think everyone should check out Cartooning for Peace or Graphic Medicine, as Adam said, because I think those are good collections of cartoons that give insight into what's going on. So I would just say, start using them. Start looking at them.
Yeah. What about you, Adam?
Well, if anybody wants to check out my comics, they can go to dragonandgoat.com. It's all one word. And the Quarantinuum coloring book is going to be up like for a while. It's like for people to download. And then I think I'm going to probably in the next week, which depending on when this is released, I think it'll be probably released by then. I'm going to have some videos for kids to see like how to make cartoons and make their own comics. So I'm assuming right now a lot of kids are struggling to find the summer camps that they really want to get into. So at least trying to get some videos up so they can start making their own comics.
Adam, has anybody shared with you some things that they've done with your coloring book?
Yeah, I haven't had, because of the concentration and not having time or mental space to really do anything. I have a few that I need to get up on the Dragon and Goat gallery. But if anybody does any of the projects, feel free to just message them to me, and they'll get up on the Dragon and Goat gallery. And some people will be getting some free pens and books that I'll be sending out.
Well, see, that's an incentive. It's like a badge. Don't we all want badges?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you both very much for taking the time. It was super informative, and really appreciate it, because Julia, that was a complete role reversal, and I think you navigated it very well, since you're most often have been a host of these. So I thank you for lending your expertise, because I've been fascinated privately talking to you about this. And Adam, it was great hearing more about what you're doing too. So thank you both very much.